Happy Monday. Hope you all had a nice long weekend. Bob McCown, John Shannon.
Hello, Robert.
With you. We are, I guess, on the verge now of the Stanley Cup playoffs. What do we got? 2 weeks left in the regular season?
Yeah. May the 1st is the last regular season game, but it actually ends on Friday, the 29th of April. Yeah.
We're going to talk about it, what we expect, even though we don't know exactly. Well, we certainly don't know who's playing who, and we don't know exactly who is going to get in and who won't get in the West yet. But we're going to dive deep into where we think things sit on the verge of the playoffs. Kevin Dupont, Brian Lawton will join us when we continue after these messages. McCown and Shannon back with you. A little hockey talk today. Brian Lawton is with us. Kevin Paul Dupont. Here's a generic thing that I'm intrigued by your perspective on. Am I crazy, or is goal scoring up this year?
Well, Anybody? It's definitely up on, I don't think it's up on average, but what is up considerably is games where one of the teams is scoring 5 goals or more.
Yeah.
That's the most in the last 30 years that we've seen this. So what does that tell us? Probably doesn't tell us a lot, but it does say that there's some more air in these. So, we went for a while there. It was the 3-2 NHL, and it seemed like it was in perpetuity. So, you know what? I like a good blowout, especially, from the perspective of the home team. Fans love it. Why not?
Hey, Brian, my concern, Brian, is that the blowouts, and Kevin's exactly right, but it's a disparity of the good teams versus the bad teams. That's what I'm concerned about.
Definitely some of that. I would be very, very cautious if I were a GM and re-signing players off of statistics from this year. It seems like everybody is up. Troy Terry, Timo Meier, Chris Kreider, guys that had some history, other guys that are younger, but maybe you didn't think they were that good. And you can just keep going around and around. Kevin, Jake DeBrusk, 22 goals. That's incredible, right? So for me, we've had some disparity because of the pandemic. We've had some different rosters on different nights, and we've certainly had a dearth of goaltenders this year. I've never seen anything like it. You can always find a goaltender when you're an NHL team. And this year, as it's been well documented with a number of teams, they've been really hurting to come up with a goaltender. And as we approach the playoffs, and I think maybe a Carolina Pittsburgh first round, I wonder who the starters will be for those teams even. So there's a lot of different factors, but boy, it's a crazy one if you're going to be signing players off of these incredible statistics that so many individual players have. I don't know if it's the new normal or just a one-off.
I don't know. I've been yearning for the Auntie Ranta Casey DeSmith matchup in the first round of the playoffs.
You just may get it. You just may get it. If Christian Jarry does have a broken foot, and if Freddie Anderson is going to be out longer, then we may see that. We'll have to call Matt. What was Zatkoff's first name? Was Pittsburgh? Remember, he had to come in and play the first game.
Oh, that's right. Matt Zatkoff. That's right.
Matt Zatkoff. We'll have to call him and ask him what that's like.
Or David Ayers.
David, well, yes, but I mean to start a playoff. I'm trying to think of other guys. Grubauer started that 1 year for Washington.
Yeah.
There's been other guys that maybe weren't the guy, but then they had to start recently. So maybe
does Toronto have it sorted out, John?
I think they do. I really do. I think that I think it's Jack Campbell's job. I think it will be Jack Campbell's job. The team is playing very well. They are thorough. Their defense is, I'll be honest, the defense is faster than I thought it was capable of being. And their 2 veteran guys in Muzzin and Giordano have done a very good job for them. So it's taken a lot of pressure off the goaltending, and that means takes a lot of pressure off Jack Campbell.
Well, the defense has taken pressure off him from an offensive standpoint more than from a defensive standpoint. The goaltending
but the puck's at the other end of the ice, Bob. It's okay.
Well, yeah. Except on the 4 occasions where it gets into the Leaf zone, the puck goes in.
Come on now. You're a little harsh on Jack Campbell.
Well, I'm being honest about Jack Campbell. When's the last time he stood on his head and won a game? And okay, he hasn't had to, but one of the things that I noticed, guys, is you've got 3 50-goal scorers already, and Ovi's at 47.
Yeah.
So he probably will get to 50. And then you got a bunch of guys around 42, 43. I don't think you're going to have probably more than 4, maybe 5 guys hit that number, but that's a big number. That's a lot for one season, isn't it?
That's my point, Bob. I think it's a one-off. I don't think it's the new normal. I just, you had some rosters that were early on from the pandemic where you were missing guys, and it's felt a lot easier to score this year. I did have one coach telling me, I'm changing the way I coach. I'm trying to absorb more risk rather than how we used to coach. Yeah, maybe. I think everybody wants to play an exciting brand of hockey, but I still think it's an anomaly.
I'm not sure of that. I mean, the guys who are getting the 50 are legit. It's not that, 2 being American, of course, Kreider and your guy in Toronto. So
Matthews.
Yeah, exactly. Matthews. So, whether it's Draisaitl, whether it's Ovechkin, I think those guys are all legitimate. I mean, I suppose in Kreider's case, it's weighted toward power play goals.
Same thing with Draisaitl. I mean, Draisaitl's had more power play goals in a season than Wayne Gretzky had in a season. So
yeah, but on the same hand, he does it consistently, doesn't he? I mean, it's not like he's going to disappear either. So again, we've waited for that. At least I have. I've waited it for the game to have more of this offense, have more air in it. Whether it's because these goaltenders are soft or not, maybe there's a degree of that. I've enjoyed it. I like the fact that not every game. Now, I'm the writer, so I enjoy not having to tear up the story 8 times in the last 6 minutes. So there's some of that in me, but it's fun.
Well, what becomes intriguing to me a little bit is we know traditionally what has happened when the playoffs arrive, and the game and the philosophy and everything changes, and coaches coach differently, and the game is played differently. Will these guys who have allegedly opened things up during the regular season revert to form when the playoffs come? And are we going to be once again batten down the hatches, play tight, play tough, try and win 2-1 or 3-2? Or are they going to let the guys who can go? What do you think?
I've been publicly, as we all are in our jobs, saying that I'm concerned for a team like Florida that scored so beautifully this year and played so incredibly. Are they going to be able to win those lower scoring games? Are they, not only do they score easily, but at times they give up goals easily. Are they going to be able to flip the switch and win those 2-1, 3-2, 3-1 games with an empty netter in the playoffs? I'm concerned for them. I'm concerned for the teams that maybe aren't as stout or used to playing that type of D, because I hope that it doesn't revert back to that. I hope that penalties are called at the same rapidity as they have been in a regular season, but that's not consistent with the history of what we've seen in this league.
Well,
of course, very much what we said before the Islander dynasty, or going into the Islander dynasty. Could they keep it up like that? And they did a beautiful job of ratcheting down and playing honest playoff defense.
Mm-hmm.
A little easier, of course, when you have the offensive guns in reserve that they did. But they did an excellent job of it. And I know that's long ago. But I do wonder about that with Florida very much. And of course, you never find out till you actually, drop the puck and see who they're going to get. I think right now they're going to Washington. And as you were asking the question, Bob, I was thinking of the Caps as the example of that. That was their bugaboo. Finally, they got over it. But they didn't seem to have plan B. They had plan A, which was Ovechkin and fill up the net. And year after year, it failed for them until finally it didn't.
The interesting thing about Florida for me, guys, is that the players that were on that team last year, they got full dose of it in their Tampa series. Because if you remember, four or five of those games were run and gun games. And in the end, they lost the series in 6. It was one of those things where they couldn't batten down the hatches as well as Tampa could. And so that, and remember, they actually, Florida had a real issue with their goaltending. They couldn't decide whether it was Bobrovsky or Drieger or Spencer Knight in that series. So from that perspective, they've been warned. The guys, the star players on that team, Barkov, Huberdeau, Ekblad, they know what they're up against. and they're, if they want to get past that first round, because Washington can play that way now. If they want to get past that first round, they're going to have to change things up.
Well, refresh my memory. The classic example of the team that didn't really care how many they gave up, only if they scored one more, was the Edmonton Oilers, who obviously had great success. Did they play differently in the playoffs? I don't have any recollection of it.
They did. I mean, there were years when they won like the first game of the finals, like 1-0.
Yeah, that's
I'd have to
right.
go back and look up what year, but I remember that.
1984.
Yeah, exactly.
Their first cup. Here, Bob, just as a guy who had a front row seat to all of that, what they tried to do in their first Stanley Cup final against the Islanders in '83 is they tried to play the same way in the final that they did all season long, which means they tried to carry the puck across the blue line. Gretzky tried to carry it. Messier tried to carry it. Everybody tried to carry it. Paul Coffey tried to carry it. And the Islanders just stood there and just poked it away. And Al Arbor just sat and laughed at them. And in the end, they had to take losing to learn how to win. And that's what teams, invariably do. We've all seen it. We've seen it with every team that's probably won the Stanley Cup in the last 30 years. But the Oilers then realize, hey, listen, in order to get through the good, solid, hard-hitting teams like the Islanders we're going to have to play their style of hockey, not our style of hockey.
Well, then it raises the question then, if, I don't know who you guys all consider the favorite, but everybody has loved Colorado for the last few years, and they certainly have performed well enough to justify a prediction of they're the next Stanley Cup champion. Are they in a position to adjust their game accordingly? Or are they going to have trouble as they have in the past when the playoffs come around? Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, I say they fit what John just outlined of that early Oilers thing in terms of can they get the forwards to buy in to more of a 200-foot game, come back, be more conservative on offense. They've got that distinguishing factor with Makar on offense, on defense, but being such an offensive presence, we'll see if he changes his outlook, but if they start to use him differently. I'll go into this probably picking, Colorado is the favorite to come out of the West, and it's one of those where I'm picking them because I feel I have to. I'm not necessarily committed to that. I've been disappointed too many times. The San Jose effect that we talked about before.
Oh yeah.
I still go into this, and I know this is betting chalk to a degree, but I know he hasn't been as good as in the past. But to me, the best goalie in the game is still Vasilevsky. And the best defenseman in the game is still Hedman. So you look at a team that's got the best goalie and the best defenseman. It's going to be very hard. Again, it's chalk. It could be 3 in a row for them, but boy, they're good.
Well, and they know how to win. And we always talk about that. You got to learn how to win. You have to lose before you learn how to win. And they did that.
Yeah.
They got knocked off by Columbus?
Exactly. Run out of the building by Columbus that year.
Yeah. And managed to figure it out. Lawton, where are you at? Are you pro Colorado? Are they good enough?
Well, first off, in terms of Tampa, obviously they're the champs until they're not the champs anymore, but they do not have the elements they had the last couple of years, even though they tried to recreate it with a couple of trades at the deadline. It's not the same as Goodrow and Blake Coleman, in my opinion. The strength that they had in that third line and Yanni Gourde, that is a little bit of a weakness for them. They can lock it down, but they needed every ounce of everything they had to win the previous 2 years. So I love their team. Victor Hedman is one of the top 3 best defensemen in the league. For me, it's hard to say this year with the way Yossi and Makar have performed, but obviously you're picking lint off $1,000 suit with those guys. But in the West, I'm concerned for Colorado. I look at teams like Minnesota and St. Louis, and fortunately, they'll probably play each other in the first round, so Colorado won't have to play both of them. But I feel like those teams could beat Colorado in the series. I really do. So it's not going to be as much as of a cakewalk, I think, as we have all said in the media, that they're just going to roll to the finals. So, I like Colorado. Yes, I agree with Kevin. They are the favorites, but it's a much more narrower margin than people would give it credence for.
Hey, Brian, what has changed in Minnesota? I mean, this was a team that had looked good on paper all the time, but there appears to be a real edge to this team now.
Yes, there is. And Billy Guerin, quite frankly, has done an awesome job of injecting some of his personality, but really just changing the dynamic in the room. Zach Parise and Ryan Suter were very popular players in Minnesota, but the minute that those guys were bought out, they turned that team over to the younger players and they grabbed a hold of it. And in some ways, maybe those guys were matriculating a little bit longer than they should, waiting for their time, because Zach and Ryan are very dominating personalities and presence in that room. But these young guys have grabbed it. They appear to have more energy, have had more fun. Kaprizov has come on the scene. Billy Guerin has kind of gone, I think, the right way, but different than how people think. He took a strength of his team, and which was their ruggedness, their toughness, their mobility, and he enhanced it at the deadline in a big way. And it's a big bet. I think it pays off for him. I think he's done an incredible job regardless of what happens. But they are a more formidable team. Kaprizov is a big part of that. Zuccarello is a big part of that. There's a lot that's gone into this team. Billy Guerin's led most of it, but Paul Fenton deserves some credit too. He went out and got Zuccarello. He went out and got Fiala. And so it's been kind of brewing for a few years, in my opinion. They have a very good team right now. And even though everybody says they're done because of cap issues after this year, they have a lot of really good young players. Kevin, you know Matt Boldy as well as anybody from your neck of the woods, and they've got a lot of other guys coming. So I'm pretty bullish on the Wild. They've done a really nice job.
And the goaltender, getting the goaltender has been more of an impact than I thought. He's been better than I thought he'd be. And frankly, I think he's a big part of these last 2.5 weeks. So I totally agree.
How much of what Marc-Andre Fleury adds isn't when he plays goal?
A lot.
A lot?
Yeah, a lot.
I don't see them game to game, but when the goaltender effect being when the team starts to believe he can do it, sometimes that's all they need is the belief, right? And I would say the games I have watched, that's been it. Now, we know too, he's old, he's vulnerable, all of that. We saw that in Vegas late in his tour there. But I think he's been the difference these last 2 to 3 weeks in my mind.
Look what's going on in the Central. St. Louis has won, 9 in a row?
Yeah.
Minnesota's like 13-1-3, right? In their last 16, 17 games. So, and Colorado's rolling. So that's why I say that's a little bit of a division of death right now. I'm very curious to see who comes out of it. Marc-Andre Fleury, full value, off the ice, full value, leader, affable. There's still something to that in pro sports. He's everything you could ever create a guy to be, and he's made a huge difference for me. 6-1. Or then we were talking about how bad he was with Chicago. Well, guess what? There is something to do with the decor in front of you. And I didn't mention it earlier, but the Minnesota Wild have a top 5 decor. They really do.
Yeah.
And that's been without Matt Dumba for a while.
Exactly. That's what's really impressive. So they're a good team. They're a good team.
Kevin mentioned San Jose earlier, and I mean, I know a lot of the hockey pucks went on a long roll of picking them to win a Stanley Cup, and they never managed to cover that ground. Colorado is almost at that point where you expect them to win. I know most people that we've talked to figure they are the best team in the NHL, and they might be. But you guys, how do we quantify the impact of not winning when you feel like you should win over an extended period of time? And how does that play into what they're going to face when the playoffs start now? That these guys, I'm sure, felt like they were the best team and kept getting beat over and over again. And now here they are again at the top of the food chain you got to think that impacts in some way, shape, or form. Lawton, did you ever experience anything like that?
My first year, we had a really good team, and they were coming off a few years of having a good team, and we lost to Edmonton 4 straight in the conference finals.
Yeah.
So I thought it was easy. That was my first year. I was like, oh, we'll eventually win. We're in the, but that had been building, and I was more on the tail end of that. Colorado, to me, the one reason why I pause or hesitate with them is the type of teams they have to beat who have gotten bigger, stronger, rougher than them. And the fact that they were a little bit resistant. Make no mistake, Marc-Andre Fleury wanted to play for Colorado. I assume everybody knows that. That was his first choice. It's a hard thing to do. Darcy Kemper's played well.
Really well, Brian. Really well.
Really well. But Minnesota, Cam Talbot was playing well, even though he had some bumps at that time. But I was surprised they didn't go for Fleury. I felt like that would have been a game changer for them. And even if they had kept Kemper, they could have flipped Kemper and probably got a first rounder. They gave up a first rounder. Both guys would have been expiring. I was surprised by that. I was surprised Colorado didn't maybe add one more D as well. Maybe a guy could shut down the cycle.
Well, yeah, but they did get Josh Manson. Manson's a difference maker. He's more physical than they've had back there. And the issue with me is that they're older defensemen, Johnson and Johnson. They're the ones they're going to be the ones that are going to become the victims if a team has an opportunity to beat the Avalanche, don't you think?
I do.
Ken, what do you think of the psychological impact of Colorado having been through this expectation of winning and failing? Is it real?
Well, I think it becomes real. It's kind of, if you will, self-fulfilling prophecy to a degree. You can't count Makar in that group, in my mind, obviously, because he's so young. But I also think, I guess within that, going back to John's analysis there about Johnson and Johnson, that's kind of their vulnerability in my mind. I'm not convinced of the goalie. I know his numbers are great right now, but I suppose I'm not convinced of it because I haven't seen it come playoff time. So, the place you kind of end up seeing these teams getting winning or losing is based on secondary scoring, the will of their number one defenseman, and the quality of their number one goaltender. I don't know about the will of their number one defenseman because it's Makar. He's such I'm not saying anomaly, but he's such a unique talent. I think of the number one as more Yossi, as the guy who's proven and strong and smart and all of it. And that may be exactly what we get to see of Makar now in a critical playoff series. But it's what happens here is we tend to look at these franchises, those who failed, San Jose being it, what's the age group and where do they rate on those three elements? San Jose kind of failed at all of them at different times, be it the goaltender, be it Joe's leadership up front, whatever it was. So it's difficult in my mind to kind of come up with, what is the key flaw or what is the key element that didn't happen for them. Here in Boston, we've watched them ever since 11. There's been always this thing about, can they do it in their window of opportunity with this core? Well, the truth of the matter is that core is sort of dissolved now.
Two guys in the core.
That's right. Krejci went home. Bergeron is 36, 37. He's getting a lot of maintenance days here down at the end. If they're going to succeed here in Boston, it ain't going to be around that core because that's really not there anymore.
Well, I want to get to the East and address some of the teams in the East, but we mentioned Colorado, St. Louis, Minnesota as competitive teams in the West. Where's Calgary, who have played pretty consistently well all year long?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether they don't get enough love, but are they good enough? Brian?
Well, they certainly don't get enough love. That's all I'll say. So,
great. They've had a great year. Darryl Sutter's been absolutely amazing. I always pause with them because I'm waiting to see their superstars really elevate in the playoffs. Markstrom's been terrific. To be fair to him, he was not good last year, but he solidified this year. Darryl got players that fit his eye more, bringing in a little bit more toughness up front, and on the back end, kind of jumping back to 12-14 when they won cups. But I still pause on them until I see the guns of Navarone, as I call them, up front. I want to see those guys explode in the playoffs. I haven't seen that in the past. And if that dries up, then I feel like they're a completely different team. Now, to be fair, Sean Monahan was a part of that. He hasn't really been a part of this year's group in a meaningful way. He's not going to be going forward here this year either, obviously. But still, Johnny Gaudreau is the one guy I'm really looking at. Matthew Tkachuk, for that matter, as well.
Mhm.
I'm looking to have a really big playoff. If those guys do, then yes, they are right there with the Minnesota and the St. Louis behind Colorado.
I often don't go into the playoffs thinking about particularly the coach's effect on a team, but it's hard not to do that with Calgary.
It
That
is.
he gets the team to play the way he wants them. And I know that's so basic, but there's always, when it happens around Sutter, the buy-in is apparent. That to me is what's happened up there this year, and we saw it in LA as well, of course. So I think he'll be a big factor in that. I don't think they'll be anything less than what they've been. That's my impression of them going in.
We'll take a look at the East in a little more depth when we come back after these messages. It's McCowan and Shannon. It's Kevin Dupont, Brian Lawton, as we take a look ahead to the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Hey, Bob,
It'll
before we
commence in a couple of weeks.
before we talk about the East, we should mention the wildest of wild cards in the West, because they have to be mentioned, and they may not even make the playoffs, and that's Vegas. And there's a good chance that either Calgary or Colorado might play Vegas. And if Robin Lehner is healthy or able to play with the lineup that Brad McCrimmon, Kelly McCrimmon and Pete DeBoer can put on the ice, Vegas can beat either Colorado or Calgary. They can. And they are to me, to repeat myself, they are the wildest of wild cards in the Western Conference.
But it just doesn't look like they're going to make it, John.
I'll tell you what, I think they are. I think they're going to make it.
You do, huh?
I think they're going to make it at Nashville's expense.
Okay. I would have thought at LA's, but who knows?
LA's schedule is so easy, Brian.
I know,
So
but I
easy.
feel like they're wilting just a little bit. They've had a great year. Todd's done an incredible job.
I know from a Boston perspective, I'd love to see it because of Eichel. I just like to see him get his chance. I don't know if he'll perform. I don't know if he'll, but from that tiny little aspect of it, it's been a long time for him. And, some of it's been, most of it's been the injury. I get that, the failed relationship in Buffalo and the ownership, everything. But I would love to get a chance to see it just from that perspective.
Well, there's no doubt they have the experience. And I think I don't disagree. I think they're dangerous.
Yeah, that's all my point is.
If they're healthy,
that's all my point is.
If they're healthy, I don't want to play them. And
I'd be
they
very
are almost.
unhappy if I were the Edmonton Oilers and ended up having to play Vegas in the first round.
Well,
You'd rather play Vegas or LA?
LA. I said I'd be very unhappy if I were the Edmonton Oilers, and that's what ended up happening after.
Yeah.
The East is intriguing. We've touched a little bit on it, but mostly from the perspective of Tampa Bay as the defending champions, two-time defending champions. You got to give them some credit and some love. And there's enough there to suggest that they'll be in the mix. But this Florida team has won 10 in a row now. They've been good all year. They've been at the top of the standings, I think, virtually every day in the Atlantic. What is it about them, besides lack of playoff experience, that would cause us to question them? Is it nothing more than the goaltending? Is it the fact that the way they play kind of, I don't know, they think offense more than they think defense? And can you turn it around? What is Florida? Are they as good as they appear to be? Lawton, I'll give it to you first.
Okay. What scares me about Florida is exactly one of the questions you were asking, is the way they play. They remind me of Washington, as Kevin quite perfectly pointed out earlier. And I mean Washington of like 8, 9, 10, 11 years ago, when they just couldn't get over the hump. Even when I was in Tampa, I can remember having games with Washington. They had this incredible team. We were obviously selecting guys like Stamkos and Hedman at that time, so we weren't so good. And they would beat us, but it would be so miraculous on any given night. We'd be winning like 5-1 with 12 minutes left, and they'd beat us 6-5 in regulation. And I would walk out of there thinking, that is not going to play in the playoffs. It may play against us on a Tuesday night in the regular season, but that type of discipline, you're not going to crawl out from under. And because of those factors, when I look at Florida and I see that, I think that there's probably still one more step for them before they develop into that kind of next team that's going to maybe win a Stanley Cup. Carolina's kind of going through that now, but Florida, to me, they may need just one more progression before they're ready to take a huge step forward and have a giant playoff.
Brian, would you feel differently if Quenneville was still there?
I would feel better, to be honest with you, Kevin. I really would. And Joel has been there and he would recognize that. Not that Andrew Brunette hasn't done a terrific job. He has. Not that the management hasn't done an incredible job, because Billy's
done a hell of a job.
He's done an incredible job, and they've got a great staff, and the changes they made so quickly and seamlessly are amazing. But it's tough to win in the end. And they went out and made every single thing I felt like they did has been a home run, whether it was draft Lundell or, even sign Mason Marchment, trade for Sam Reinhart, sign Anthony Duclair. It's like, I haven't seen anybody have the run that they've had in terms of making fantastic decision after fantastic decision. So I don't by any means mean to be dogging them. I just think that the style, as you said, Bob, the way they play is not conducive to winning in the playoffs.
So if they're one piece away, what's that piece, Kevin? Is it a goaltender? Is it a defenseman?
Well, I think they've got the goaltender. I mean, I like Bobrovsky more than a lot of people. Maybe, I guess. I know there's by a lack of a better word here, temperament maybe sometimes hasn't been right or gets sort of off. But I think they've got it all. And back to the Zito thing, he's been like watching the guy play the Monopoly board and goes around and passes on all the junk property and buys the right property on on all four sides of the game board. So in the end, it's just left to now. John, you mentioned that series last year. I thought that was one hell of a series.
It was.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fast. And so I say to myself, are they going to change that much from what we saw that they went out and lost with? I don't know. I don't know what they'll come with, right?
But to me, that was purely goaltending breakdown for them.
Yes.
The other guy, Vasilevsky, was consistent, and they stuck with Vasilevsky. Last year, though, I mean, Bobrovsky let them down. I mean, Spencer Knight should have never seen the net.
Right.
He should have never seen the net. And yet they had to. And so that gave you an indication at that point, and when Joel was coaching, that there was an era of desperation to find something that worked. They have, and what we haven't mentioned for Florida is the addition of Claude Giroux. What Giroux has done for the deadline, and quite frankly, I'm always one of those guys that's skeptical of adding a superstar at the deadline because chemistry becomes an issue. But in watching them play, chemistry has been far from an issue with Giroux and Barkov and Huberdeau. It has been he's fit hand in glove there.
Yeah, and it must be in some sense. Of course, I've never been an elite athlete, so I wouldn't know this. But from the outside, to have been what he had to be day to day, year after year in Philly, and then come in here and have I'm not going to say defined role, but have less of a role and not have to be that guy every night to see the product win.
Agreed.
There must be a relief in that for him. So I'm left really to wonder, and I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth on this to a degree, because sure, they had Joel there last year and it didn't work. And there's a guy who, given what his experience with, so much of what you see in these coaches is they don't necessarily have faith in themselves to keep with their conviction, right? So I would think that, if you will, the rookie coach is going to struggle with that. Whereas, last year Quenneville would have no issue, but it didn't work. So who the hell knows?
Carolina's a team that we paid attention to all year because they came out of the gate quick and have been, like Florida, near the top of their division all year. But they've now been caught by the New York Rangers, a team that John has mentioned them a couple times to keep your eyes on them. But as a general rule, they've been flying under the radar. They're pretty good, but are they ready? Are they, do they have enough playoff experience to be able to carry it? How good is this team, Lawton?
That's a very good question. Well, Carolina for me is a team that is ready to go on a run. It could be their year, but this is going to be a complicated year with how good the East is. The Rangers, on the other hand, are a team that have, in my opinion, reinvented themselves more than anybody else since the trade deadline. Metrically, analytically, Rangers did not look good, even though they were winning up until that point. And now they're still winning, but they look much better doing it. It does matter. The process does matter. So I'm pretty bullish on the Rangers as opposed to where I was just recently. And in Carolina's case, they're just in a window where one of these years they're going to rise up and make it to the Stanley Cup final. I don't know if they'll win, but I absolutely believe that's in the cards for them. The Freddie Anderson injury concerns me, but yes, I like Carolina. I like the Rangers. The Rangers are a little bit like St. Louis in that they are, at least we could say, peaking at the right time.
Mm-hmm. The Andrew Kopp trade, Andrew Kopp has been a godsend for them. He's done, the price of working in a small market like Winnipeg. I don't think people outside of Winnipeg appreciated Andrew Kopp. Well, now, Madison Square Garden is appreciating what Andrew Kopp is as a hockey player. He's a brilliant hockey player and so versatile, Brian. And he's a perfect playoff guy.
Yeah, I agree. And even Frank Vetrano, I'm shocked. Evan, you probably are shocked. You saw him up close and personal in Boston, and he just jumped right into a top six role, right fit, scored pretty consistently, afforded them an opportunity to move some of their younger players down the lineup a little bit, and they've just played much better D. On top of that, I coach this Keandre Miller, I feel like, every year in the Beauty League, and I've been waiting for this guy to explode, and I'm finally now just seeing it. He is such a talent. He really is. He's kind of a quiet kid. It's taken him a while to get that internal confidence playing in the world's biggest market, so to speak, in terms of for the Rangers and MSG, but he is a special talent.
So we have now gone through almost 40 minutes of this conversation and not mentioned the Toronto Maple Leafs, who deserve to be mentioned, given that they've won 50 games for the first time, I think, in their history.
Correct.
Got 106 points, which is the most they've ever had in their history.
Correct.
They have plenty of talented players. They can certainly put the biscuit in the basket with the best of them. Can they keep it out? Well, that's always the question. But whether you win 5-4 or 1-0, I suppose a win is a win. And yet they've had nothing but failure and disappointment in the opening round of the playoffs. Is there anything you guys see in this edition of the Maple Leafs that suggests a different result when the playoffs come around? Kevin, you've seen them probably more than, I don't know whether you've seen them more than Lawton has, but you've seen them a fair bit. They impress you? Would you like, or are you cautious?
Well, I'm cautious, and sarcastically, I'll say that they don't have Nazem Kadri to blow it up on them. So they're ahead of the game right there, right? But I saw them after the Giordano trade. I thought, of course, when you're high on someone before the trade, you're going to be high when you see them. So I thought when I saw them after the trade, they were here in Boston. They played the Bruins very well. They, frankly, ran them out of their own building. I like what he's brought to the back. Stabilizing force, smart, still can get it, he can jump into the play. So there's a lot in him, and I'm glad they got him. I still don't. That's why I asked John earlier if he's convinced about the goaltender. It's just such a critical position to be obvious, but I thought they had it nailed at the start of the year with him. Then obviously, I don't know whether that was fatigue, or I know he got hurt there with the rib and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily go in. I feel better about their defense than I have in recent years. Their offense is excellent. I love Marner. I just don't know about the goaltender.
Lawton?
Toronto has had an incredible year, tied for the third fewest losses in the league, behind only Colorado and Florida, tied with a few other teams with 20 losses. That's incredible. 50 wins, hitting all kinds of milestones individually and a team. Love everything about it. Love the season they've had. I've been surprised. Jake Muzzin and the combination of Giordano returning have Toronto as the second most improved team, really, from the deadline, even though it wasn't exactly then in terms of their overall game. With all that said, I still believe they're going to lose in the first round. Unfortunately for them, they're probably going to play Tampa, and that does not bode well for them. But they're playing as well as I've ever seen them. I think their management has done a tremendous job, and I've always been tough on them because I've never liked the allocation of their dollars so heavily into their forward group and not nearly as much in their decor or their goaltending. But they have absolutely proven me wrong. They've had a great season. They will ultimately, unfortunately, be judged by how they do in the playoffs. And if they get Tampa, that's a really unfavorable draw for them.
Is that a completely bad matchup for them, Brian? When you think about what Hedman does on the ice and what strength down the middle that the Tampa has with Point and Kucherov?
I think it is a bad matchup for them. If they can find a way through the Lightning, it'll probably have to come from their third line matchup.
Yeah.
Bottom line matchups, in my opinion, literally. I think they can play even in terms of with the forward group, or maybe even better. They're in tough goaltending. Their D is better, but they won't, if you just go through and rank each individual matchup, who has a better goaltender? Okay, Tampa. Who has the better forwards? Okay, it's a tie. Maybe Toronto. Who has the better D? Tampa. Who has the better special? If you just keep going and weight it, you will not come out with Toronto as the favorite, even if they finish second. It doesn't mean they can't win. The margin between teams in the playoffs is so small, as everyone knows, but it's a tough matchup for them, in my opinion.
And I think a factor you have to consider with Tampa is, and we saw this with Pittsburgh when Pittsburgh tried to three-peat, is you get to this point, and there's been so much going on here the last 2 years with COVID and the seasons. But given the age of some of their key players, just that psychological workload, the exhaustion of trying to make it 3 in a row, there's no way of measuring that or quantifying going in. But I think I know it's real because we've seen it. I didn't think there was any reason Pittsburgh should have lost after having won a couple. It was still an excellent team, but an excellent team at this point, going for third straight when these margins are so thin, very difficult for a team to hold up to it.
So before we go, Boston, Pittsburgh, Washington, the 3 other teams in the East, and they've been the 3 other teams in the East for well over a month. We've known for a long time who the playoff teams are going to be in the East. Which of these is the most likely to jump up and bite somebody? Each one of them is capable, I think. We would all agree, but is there one that you like better than the other of those 3? Kevin, throw it to you first.
I would say Pittsburgh. Boston has not done a good job against the better teams. Their record is, you're always going to be somewhere around, I guess, 500 against the best teams. But it's not only have they not beaten them, they haven't played well against better teams. They've got some issues going on now. Whether they're just going on a short road trip here. They're again not going to have some key players. The big one, of course, Pasternak, power play hasn't scored for 6-7 straight games now. So I'm not feeling that good about Boston. Pittsburgh, if Malkin is in there, he's not right now, suspended, but if Malkin is in there, I still think they've got a lot. They've got to find out if the goaltender's healthy as well. But of those three, Washington, I think, really tapers off down on the bottom six.
Mm-hmm.
I would say Pittsburgh of those three.
Brian Lawton, last word to you.
Pittsburgh, I actually just kind of dove into this because I was curious on the record. I felt like they were beating a lot of weaker teams consistently, and the numbers were over freaking whelming against Pittsburgh. They were like 24-2-3 against teams outside the playoffs and 9-13-5 against playoff competitors. So because of that, I just can't overlook it. I heard my good friends on XM radio talking about this very topic this morning. We'll see if there's any truth in that. Obviously, no Tristan Jerry. That causes me pause. I love the Boston Bruins, Kevin. I'm surprised that they weren't your pick. I think the changes they made at the deadline have really enhanced them. Hampus Lindholm is,
if he's healthy.
If he's healthy, he is a massive difference maker for them.
Mm-hmm.
I would take Boston to rise up. I would still have Pittsburgh second in that list of three, and Washington would be my third choice.
Well, we're almost fine at the finish line of the regular season. It just seemed like a long regular season, and especially if you're a basketball fan too. And the basketball season ending 2 weeks before the NHL season is, never happened before, really. So we're a little whacked out, but we're getting there. And pretty soon we'll be talking about these playoffs, being in it. Boys, we thank you as always. We appreciate your time and good health. And we'll talk to you down the road, we hope. Thank you, guys.
All right, lads.
Thank you, guys. Great to see you, Bob. Of course, you're correct. 200 days, the longest season in the history of the NHL, I believe. Up from
there you go.
180 to 186.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Dupont, Brian Lawton. We'll come back and wrap it after these messages. We are back. Our thanks to Brian Lawton, Kevin Dupont for joining us on the program. The Toronto Raptors play game 2 against Philadelphia 76ers tonight and will do so undermanned. The great likelihood is that 3 of their prominent players will not participate. Gary Trent Jr., Thad Young, and Scotty Barnes are listed as doubtful for tonight. That does not augur well when one considers they got their doors blown in game 1. Having said that, this is a team that also in their championship year lost the first 2 in Milwaukee, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, they did.
And managed to come back and win 4 straight. So what happens tonight is not necessarily a be all and end all, but it doesn't look good.
The one thing I would say about the Raptors, Bob, is that, and we had a good indication in the second half, is that once Siakam started to work inside, he was very effective. And the 76ers did not have a very good defense for Siakam playing within 8 feet of the hoop. So, you know, it took the Raptors that much time to get into that rhythm of having him down low in tight. And I would think that might be the difference tonight. At
the end of it, though, I mean, it was the defense that let them down. This is a team that had one of the best defensive records in the NBA this year, and you can't give up 130 points. You're not going to beat anybody.
No, but and the other thing I would say is this is not the Embiid of 2019. This is the real deal now.
Well,
he's
I get
different
that.
Player. He's got another dimension. He's got a ton more confidence. You know, I'd seen him play 4 or 5 times this year, but holy smokes, was he good.
No doubt about it. But they played in my opinion, they played as close as you can get to a perfect game.
They shot well for sure.
They shot well from 3. They had 1 turnover.
Yeah.
1. That's almost unheard of, especially against a Raptor team that does this. And they dominated the boards too, which is something that the Raptors have done to other teams.
But
I don't know what
Maxey was so good.
Oh, they were all good. I mean, look,
man,
they were near perfect. And I don't know what that's going to mean. And it may mean nothing given the injuries that the Raptors have. They are going to be life and death to stay even competitive against the Sixers. And then probably we'll have to hope that they get healthy in time for Wednesday in game 3. Before we go, we want to acknowledge something we all learned yesterday, and that was our friend, who's a regular contributor to this program, Buck Martinez, has been diagnosed with a cancer. He is now going to take a leave of absence from doing Blue Jay games because he's going to go into therapy and
treatment. Yeah.
And treatment. And we're hopeful. And I think Buck is confident that he'll be back later in the season, and that he's been told that this is highly treatable. I don't know the specifics of the cancer, but I want to take the opportunity, I know you did too, John, to wish him the speediest of recovery, and we'll be thinking about him.
The utmost respect for Buck Martinez. I'll tell you what I said to him yesterday in a text. If any guy can beat cancer, it's a guy that can throw a guy out at third base with a broken leg, and that's Buck Martinez.
There you go. I cannot disagree. I sent him a text as well. I can't recall exact words that I used, but we'll all be thinking about him, and we wish him a speedy recovery. Enjoy whatever you're watching tonight, whether it's basketball or hockey or baseball or something else. We'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same station. For John Shannon, Bob McCowan. See ya.